And the whole time they were hitting you, and I know earlier they were heckling and saying, "Oh, he hears us." Or they were making fun of you because your gown didn't cover your entire body and making fun of that. And at this point, what were they saying to you? They were screaming obscenities at you, or?
Yeah, and laughing a lot. There was a lot of laughter, and you know, it's really hard for me to talk about this, but you know, it's like he really hates this, as someone was gouging me in the eye or other things, and their purpose was entirely to humiliate me, not to destroy me, but to humiliate me, and they're biting and scratching and you know, violating me in all kinds of ways. And
you wrote in the book that when they actually came in physical contact with you, even though you had seen what appeared to be clothing on them, you didn't feel any clothing at that point.
Right.
And that they were like humans, but they had describe what
well,
they
their nails seemed very harsh and sharp. And a lot of them were biting me, and I've not been bit a lot in my life, but they seemed to have exceptionally sharp, jagged teeth as they were biting and gnawing on me.
They're just ripping your flesh from your body, ripping it apart?
Well, if they'd really wanted to do that, they could have had done with me in a few minutes.
Right.
No, they wanted to torment me. And so what they were doing was really simple. They were trying to inflict pain. And it was clear to me that these people had no, what we would think of as compassion, no love, no human sensation of their own. So what they were doing was they were feeding off my pain, if that makes any sense, that gave them
pleasure.
It gave them some kind of pleasure to get as much pain out of me as possible. And so they were trying to prolong that as much as possible.
How would you describe that kind of pain? You went through excruciating pain in the hospital, obviously. Yeah. Was it 10 times worse than that, or?
It was much worse physically, but what hurt more about it was them doing it to me. You know, as a human being and as a man, and they did a lot of unspeakable things to me, which are just how could someone do this to you? That's what hurt more. Their utter lack of any interest in me other than to hurt me is what really hurt, more than the physical pain. And this just went on and on and on and on and on. I don't ever think about it, because if I even get close to it, I get really upset. So, and there are certain things in the world that I don't like because they remind me of it. And
you wrote that it actually traumatizes you when you think about.
Yeah, and like I can't go to a bar and stuff because the noise in there and stuff. It's too. It's not the same, but it's just a little bit of comparison between the kind of frivolity of a bunch of drunks in a bar, you know, to what I experienced there. I don't like really loud music because of it. But anyhow, so I was lying in that place, all torn up, broken up, beat up, but more importantly, emotionally destroyed. And people were kicking me, and I couldn't respond anymore. I couldn't even moan or groan or anything. I was lying in a fetal position, just sort of trying to protect myself, all ripped up, and people were kicking me, and they were expressing their disappointment that I didn't have any more response to what they were doing. And I heard, strangely, my voice, although I distinctly did not say it, pray to God. And I thought to myself, being an atheist, like, what a dumb idea. I don't believe in God. And the second time, pray to God. And I thought, I haven't prayed, you know, in my adult life. I had stopped praying when I was like 15 or something. And I'm 38 now, so I had no remembrance of prayer. And I thought, I wouldn't even know how to pray if I wanted to pray. And then a third time, said pray to God, and I was thinking, what did I say when I was a kid? I was not intending to pray. I was just sort of curious if there was a prayer somewhere in my memory. And I was trying to remember things, and it all got mixed up with the Pledge of Allegiance and the National Anthem. It just became this big confused mess with the 23rd Psalm and the Our Father and things like that. And it was all those little phrases mixed up here and there in my mind. And really wanted to grasp at some of this stuff. I wanted to recall this. And I accidentally muttered a couple phrases, and the people around me could not bear to have the mention of God. And they told me so in the most filthy, horrible language that they wanted me to stop, to not talk about God, and now they were going to really hurt me if I didn't stop. But because it was so repulsive to them and literally pushing them into the darkness, it encouraged me to try and... So I was just trying to think of phrases from these memories, and they're screaming and yelling at me to stop, and I'm trying to remember these things, and eventually I'm all alone in that place. And it's hard for people to understand, but I was left alone in that darkness, in my gore and in my pain, forever and ever and ever. And it's impossible to talk about. But that was the real hell.
Because you knew. And you wrote in your book that you were in the sewer of the universe.
Yeah, and I knew that I was going to be there forever. You know, and it was so bad being alone in that place that it was even like, well, maybe some of them will come back. You know, not all of them, but maybe, you know, I mean, you know, anything but just to be here. And as I looked over my life, I thought about what a failure I had been in terms of I had not been a good husband, I had not been a good father, I had not been a good teacher. Because the reason why I wasn't because I was always obsessed with what's in it for me. I was not the great artist that I'd hoped to be. I was just a mediocre artist, you know, at a mediocre university. Everything looked so bleak, and I was thinking, why was I ever born to end up in this place of horror and torment, and now just abject hopelessness and loneliness? I knew that I belonged there. There was absolutely no sense that, you know, they got the wrong guy, or you know, I'm innocent, you know. I knew that the people that had attacked me earlier had been people like me. I'm not proud of this, I'm really ashamed of this, but there was a spiritual affinity between them and me. They were like soulmates, if you will. And that my only hope in this place was to somehow become one of them and no longer be their victim. But I didn't want to do that either because I hated them and I hated what they stood for and I hated their darkness and their cruelty and all that. And so the situation seemed to be so completely hopeless. I knew that I was never going to see my wife again. I was never going to see the world again. I didn't know where I was, but I knew that I was in the garbage heap. I was in the cesspool. And I knew that when you die, your consciousness and who you are keeps going. Mm-hmm. And it was going to go on forever. I knew that I could never be extinguished. And
what were you thinking about God at that point?
I got the strangest, vivid memory in my mind of myself as a child, maybe like 8 years old, sitting in a Sunday school classroom, and we were singing Jesus Loves Me. And not only did I get the memory of myself as a child doing this, but I could also feel what I had felt as a sweet, innocent child. Just as simple as possible, that there was a goodness in the universe, unknowable goodness, much greater and bigger than anything that we could understand out there. And its name was Jesus, and that this goodness really cared about me, really loved me. I mean, not generically, but specifically cared about me, this really great, wonderful, I hate to call him a man, but this personage, Jesus, who was unlike any human being in his greatness and his power and his goodness.
So this inspiration was being given to you at this point then?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And it was a very powerful memory. Well, you can imagine, as deep in despair as I was, this was like, and this would be like giving the Hope Diamond to a pauper on the street. I mean, this is like, you know, I'm going to go for this because this is like the first ray of hope I've seen in this whole scenario.